Today's topic is on the power of prayer, and hearing the prayers that Reverend Kay asked for this morning, it reminds me that we really live in a world of contrasts. So there's a lot of chaos going on in our world. There's war, there's natural disasters, there's trauma, there's illness. And whether that affects us personally or globally, it affects us. And at the same time, there is this awesome beauty. I don't know about you, but I love to walk outside, and there are beautiful sunsets. I'm not usually too much walking at sunrise time, but I know some people who are. There are flowers that are coming up. I even like it when it snows and you have the, softness and the quiet of the snow. And it's challenging sometimes to be a human being in this world because things happen, and sometimes we might be grateful that we were spared. When there's a tornado, it can go right down a street and somebody 1 foot away is not affected when the person across the street, their house is completely destroyed. Like, why me? Why me did my house get destroyed, and why me was I spared? Or when illness happens and somebody is trying to do everything they know how to do, but it just keeps getting worse and worse. So I think most of us, in fact, I would say all of us, don't want people to suffer. We don't want to suffer. We don't want other people to suffer. And sometimes we just feel powerless because we can't take their pain away. And it's the only thing we would want to do. I knew somebody who, I think she has 4 sons, maybe 5, and one of them was dealing with addiction over and over again. And she said to me one time, my husband and I have tried everything. We've bailed him out of jail, we've paid for him to get his own place, we've cut him off from that and said, okay, now it's up to you to do your own thing, and no matter what we do, he just keeps getting caught in this spiral. And if I knew that if I sacrificed my life, that it would save him, I would gladly do it. And that just really, it touched my heart because she didn't know what else to do. And that's when I think prayer is so important, because prayer is a way that we align our mind with the divine. And in my opinion, rather than telling God, this is what I want you to do, I want you to give me a kidney, I want you to fix my house, I want you to win the Super Bowl for us. I'll actually do that. That the purpose of prayer is really to ask what God wants of us and from us. For a while, I had a little card taped on my mirror that said, what would God have me do today? And that was my prayer in the morning so that I could help myself align with something greater than my individual self to be in harmony. And I don't know if you've heard this, but there's a saying, prayer doesn't change circumstances, it changes us. And I believe that that's true, but sometimes it might be hard to see how does it change us. So I think one way it changes us is to help us feel safe, to feel protected, to feel comforted, maybe to feel that we're not alone. And this was a long time ago, but it was a very powerful experience for me in the power of prayer. I was married some years ago to a man who had a number of medical issues. And one morning I was at work, and this was before cell phones, that's how long ago it was, at least before we had cell phones. And I just had this urge to call John, and I called him, and he said, I was just about to call you, I think I need help. So he had become blind as a complication of the disease that he had, and he had gone through a surgery to get a graft inserted in his arm. Anyway, I'm not going to give you all the gory details, but it burst an artery in his arm. And what was really kind of alarming to me is that morning I woke up and I had had a dream that he died. And the dream didn't feel scary. It felt very peaceful. It felt very connected. And it was so powerful. I told him when I woke up, I thought, should I tell him? And he seemed okay with it. But when I got that phone call and then went home and saw how bad things were, I thought, oh my God, I wonder if this is a precognitive dream. Is he going to die today? So we looked in the country, and an ambulance came. We went to 3 different hospitals, and finally, at about midnight, they took him into surgery. And so instead of having the intense concentration on having to deal with the emergency, I'm sitting there in the waiting room, and I called a teacher of mine, and I hadn't told anybody. I told her what was happening, and I said, I had a dream this morning that John died, and I don't know if he's going to die on the operating table. And she said, did you call his mother? So we were in Missouri. His mother was in Arizona. It hadn't even occurred to me to call his mother. So I called her, and she's a very gracious woman. Religion is a big part of her life. Prayer is a part of her life. And she said, should I come out there? And I said, I really don't know. And, it was at midnight, so she wasn't going to hop on a plane right then. So what she did is she got on the phone and she called all of her family, all of the people in her church family. They called everybody that they knew, and they got this big prayer chain going. I mean, like a web that covered the entire United States and even some other countries. And when I was sitting there in that waiting room, I could feel the power of those prayers. I just felt so comforted, and I knew that I wasn't alone, where before, the whole day, I felt like I was completely alone dealing with this. And anyway, he came through this surgery. The surgeon was kind of amazed that it was a much better outcome than he had expected. And, I still wonder, did those prayers save his life? I don't know. But what I do know is that prayer saved me. It saved me from freaking out. It saved me from just feeling so devastated. And I think that's how prayer changes us. It gives us a state of mind and a connection with the divine. So part of the challenge of prayer is trying to understand, how does it work? We don't ever really know that prayer is the factor that healed someone, or prayer is the factor that saved somebody from getting into a car wreck. But when we believe that it does, then it makes it worth it to pray. I mean, why not? It's like, how could you go wrong if you're praying for a good outcome? I used to spend probably 80% of my time on the road with my work. And many times I had to drive in pretty treacherous conditions. Like, I used to drive from Missouri to Colorado and back at least once a month. And sometimes when you're driving that stretch across Kansas in a snowstorm, you can't see anything. And it was scary. And so I used to pray, please God, keep me safe. And then one day I just kind of had this insight, maybe I should thank God for keeping me safe instead of praying to God to keep me safe. And so that's what I would do when I was, gripping the steering wheel. I would just chant in my mind, thank you for keeping me safe. Thank you for keeping me safe. And miraculously, I always was safe. And so I think that it can be helpful to consider, what are we actually praying for? So I want to talk a little bit about the relationship and difference between prayer, meditation, and visualization, because I think sometimes people kind of combine those. So prayer is when we're talking to the divine, and the divine is different for different people. Some people think of God as a person who's up there in the sky or somewhere. Some people think of God as a divine force. Some people don't, in fact, probably a lot of people don't really know what they think or who they think God is. And it doesn't really matter, because whoever or whatever we're praying to, that is what will have meaning for us. I know for me, for many years, one of my prayers was, I want to know God's presence and feel God's presence. Not just believe that there's a God, but really feel God's presence. And meditation, in my experience, is when we listen to God's response to the prayer when we're talking to God. And that listening response can come in a lot of different ways. It can come in a feeling of comfort, like when I was sitting in that hospital waiting room. Sometimes it's kind of like a voice. I know that I used to think I was crazy sometimes because I hear voices, but that voice can be the divine speaking to us. It can come with a sense of certainty when we're making a decision. Sometimes people pray for wisdom or guidance or to discern what's the right path. It can come in music. I didn't think about this when I was planning today's message, but this afternoon I'm going to Handel's Messiah, which is such an awesome composition. And Handel said that music was divinely inspired. And people in the dream world say that he actually dreamed the music, which is another way of divine inspiration. So if we're going to listen to God, we need to have a still mind. Just like in a conversation. Have you ever been in conversation with someone and you say something, and before you've even finished what you're saying, they jump in and they say what they think you're saying? It's like, no, that isn't what I was saying. Because they don't know how to still their mind enough to really hear. And that same thing is true if we want to receive God's response. We need to be able to concentrate and still our minds so that we can receive what that response is. So then visualization is creating our own images of what we want. And sometimes I think people visualize instead of praying. It's kind of like in healing, in my experience, it's best to heal for the goodness for all concerned. Like asking the divine, what is going to help this person to be whole? Instead of praying for a specific physical outcome. Like, I pray that this person gets a kidney, or I pray that this person's leg is repaired, which might be in their best interest, but maybe not. We don't really know. So by praying for what is in the divine will, I think that's what brings about the wholeness. Sometimes when there are things in my life that seem really like they don't make sense, I pray to understand this from God's point of view. Like there has to be a purpose for this. And so I want to understand it from your point of view, God, instead of bringing God down to earth and saying, hey, give me this thing. Because maybe getting this thing is not going to be what's in the highest good. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So by praying for understanding or wisdom, or what is this situation here to teach me? That's a question that I ask sometimes. Then it helps us to receive insight into all of those answers. I think that the more that we can use our prayers to understand that there is some power that is greater than our own individual will, the better able we are to align our will with the divine will. And if the stories that we hear about Jesus are true, that was his prayer. Take this, if it be your will, forget the exact quote, take this suffering from me, but not my will, but thy will be done. And that's really challenging. We want to have our will done. I want this, and I want it right now. And, sometimes what we need to pray for is patience or understanding. And that's part of how I understand those prayers of, let me understand this from the divine point of view. Maybe this situation is here so that I can grow in some way. I can grow to be more generous. I can grow to be more forgiving. I can grow to be more compassionate. I can grow, for me, part of my challenge, especially when I was teaching more than full-time was to pray for the best interest of my students, even when it looked to me like they were making decisions that weren't healthy for them. And how can I continue to love this person even when they're making choices that don't, to me, seem to be loving to themselves. So I know people have different experiences with how to pray, and there's a lot of ways that we can do it. I mean, one of the reasons that I referenced Handel's Messiah is that sometimes prayer can come by singing inspirational, uplifting, or sacred music. I mean, for me, I can really feel the presence of the divine when I'm listening to or singing that kind of music. We can pray by using our own words. We can pray by reading different scriptures or reading prayers that other people have written. Last week, Reverend Polly recited the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi, which is one of my favorites. And I really appreciate interfaith prayers. So I have several books that have prayers from many different religions. Some of them are from scripture, some of them are from people, different mystics. And part of the reason why I like that is that people in different cultures and with different languages might use a little bit different words, and so it can kind of help me to expand my mind to receive how somebody else might look at prayer. So I appreciated that Reverend Kay this morning was praying for wisdom for our leaders. I have mentioned this a couple of times, but some years ago I spent 10 days at it's not really a convent, it's called the Solitude. They're a small group of nuns who live there in silence and prayer. And every morning and 4 times a day, they prayed liturgy, and they always included prayers for the president. And I know that these nuns pray for the president, no matter who the president is, no matter what's going on, because I don't know if any of you have been in positions of leadership. It is very challenging to be in a position of leadership. There is no way you can ever make decisions that everybody is going to like and approve of. And there are always going to be people who point a finger and say, why don't you do this? And why don't you do that? And when you say, would you like to help? They say, oh, no, I don't want to help. You should do this. And praying for guidance for those who are willing to put themselves in positions of leadership, I believe is very helpful to them and to us. So I just want to give a few kinds of prayers. There are prayers of praise. There are prayers of thanksgiving. There are prayers for asking for something you want, which is called supplication. Prayers of confession or forgiveness. Prayers for understanding and wisdom. Prayers of guidance. I know for me, when I'm dealing with a decision that seems difficult or troubling, I really like to pray to be guided that whatever choice I make is going to be in the highest and best good of everyone concerned. And I just want to close with reading to you a couple of prayers that are from the Bible, which I really appreciate. And so this one is from Proverbs. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will direct your paths. And this one is Psalms 19. I love this one. I used to have it posted in different places in my house. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. And the final one, which is a wonderful blessing, it's from Numbers. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord show you his favor and give you peace. And thank you.